Introduction. The world today features sharp contrasts in governance. Some systems disperse power through constitutional divisions and democratic accountability, others concentrate it in a single leader or narrow elite with few checks. This essay compares democratic federalism as seen in stable examples like the United States, Germany, Canada, Switzerland, and Australia with developing world autocracies, often personalist, competitive authoritarian, or distributive regimes in Africa, Asia, Latin America, and the Middle East. The distinction is not merely taxonomic, it speaks to fundamental questions about how societies manage diversity, sustain development, and protect human freedom over time. Federalism manages diversity and protects liberty through shared sovereignty. By constitutionally dividing authority between national and subnational governments, federal systems create multiple arenas for political participation, policy innovation, and accountability. Autocracies prioritize centralized control and stability, often sacrificing long-term freedom and institutional strength for the sake of regime survival and short-order governance. The analysis covers definitions, the Russian case of subverted federalism, varieties of autocracy, the federal autocratic interface, developmental outcomes, and resilience. An appendix examines democratic backsliding in federal systems, a growing concern even within established democracies. Part I, Core Principles. Democratic federalism divides authority constitutionally between a central government and subnational unit states, provinces, regions, each with real autonomy, independent revenues, and institutions. Unlike unitary systems, where subnational governments exist at the pleasure of the center, federalism embeds territorial autonomy in fundamental law, making it difficult for any single level of government to unilaterally abolish or fundamentally alter the powers of another. Key elements include a written constitution delineating exclusive, concurrent, and reserved powers. Independent courts to resolve disputes between levels of government. Regional representation in national institutions, e.g. bicameral legislatures with an upper house representing territorial units. Supermajority amendment requirements ensuring that changes to the federal bargain require multi-level consent. This model suits large, diverse societies where geographic, ethnic, linguistic, or cultural differences create distinct regional interests. As James Madison noted in Federalist No. 51, federalism creates double security for liberty via horizontal checks, separation of powers among branches, and vertical checks, division of powers between levels. Federal democracies foster accountability by bringing government closer to citizens, encourage policy experimentation, what Justice Louis Brandeis called laboratories of democracy, and build resilience by distributing political authority across multiple centers of power. Developing world autocracies concentrate power, often personalizing it around a leader or a cohesive inner circle. Many adopt democratic trappings: elections, parliaments, judiciaries, but subordinate them to executive will. They use patronage, media control, security sector loyalty, and ethnic or religious manipulation to sustain rule. Drawing on the influential typology of Geddes, Wright, and France, categories include distributive rentier states like Gulf monarchies, oil or mineral revenues by loyalty via subsidies, public sector jobs, and patronage networks. These regimes often prove remarkably durable because they can fund co-optation without extracting taxes, which dampens demands for representation. Competitive authoritarian, e.g. Turkey, Hungary, Venezuela, elections occur regularly but are systematically tilted via media dominance, opposition harassment, judicial pressure, and selective prosecution. Incumbents enjoy unfair advantages, yet opposition actors retain some space to organize, creating a hybrid zone between democracy and full authoritarianism. Personalist, e.g. Belarus, Eritrea, parts of Central Asia, power revolves around a single ruler, with weak institutionalization and uncertain succession. Such regimes are often unstable, prone to collapse upon the leader's death or incapacitation. These regimes adapt modern tools for control: digital surveillance, disinformation campaigns, legal manipulation, while projecting legitimacy through nationalist appeals, developmental claims, or religious authority. Part 2, Russia federalism hollowed out. Russia exemplifies federal form serving authoritarian substance. Its constitution lists 85 federal subjects, with republics holding theoretical elevated status as homelands for non-Russian ethnic groups. In the 1990s, under Boris Yeltsin, regions enjoyed real autonomy amid weak central power. Some republics negotiated bilateral treaties granting extensive sovereignty, governors wielded significant authority, and regional laws often diverged from federal statutes. Under Vladimir Putin since 2000, centralization unfolded systematically. 2000 to 2004, creation of 7, later 8 federal districts overseen by presidential envoys tasked with monitoring regional compliance. The Federation Council, previously composed of regional governors and legislative chairs, was reformed to consist of appointed representatives, severing governors' direct influence over national legislation. 2004 to 2005, gubernatorial elections ended, appointments by the president with regional legislative approval replaced them. This gave the Kremlin direct control over regional executives, transforming governors from independent power brokers into administrative agents. 2005 to 2010, tax revenues recentralized, with approximately 80% of total tax collection flowing to the federal government. Unfunded mandates, federal responsibilities imposed without corresponding revenue, left regions dependent on federal transfers. United Russia became a tool for presidential directives, vetting candidates, and enforcing discipline across all levels of government. Regional legislatures, once sites of genuine contestation, became rubber stamps for executive preferences. Scholars describe this as an autocracy sustaining or hollow federation. Formal structures persist, but power concentrates in the Kremlin. Central control strengthens where regional democracy weakens most, showing genuine federalism's incompatibility with autocracy. The Russian case demonstrates that federal institutions alone do not constrain authoritarianism; indeed, they can be repurposed to entrench it. Recent developments 2025 to 2026 reinforce this trajectory. Amid the Ukraine conflict and preparations for 2026 Duma elections, the regime further entrenches centralized authority. Regional elites face intensified loyalty screening, independent local media have been shuttered, and budgetary discretion has narrowed to near irrelevance. No signs of reversal appear. Russia thus serves as a cautionary tale: federal forms, once subverted, may become more effective instruments of centralized control than unitary structures would be, because they provide layered administrative reach while retaining a veneer of constitutional legitimacy. Part 3, Varieties of Developing World Autocracy. Distributive autocracies. Gulf states such as Saudi Arabia, Kuwait, the United Arab Emirates use resource rents for welfare and patronage, proving durable despite regional upheavals like the Arab Spring. Their resilience stems from a bargain in which citizens forego political rights in exchange for material benefits. Climate change and global energy transitions now threaten this model, as fossil fuel revenues face long-term decline. Competitive authoritarian regimes hold elections but skew them. Media control, judicial pressure, electoral manipulation preventing real power alternation. Levitsky and Way's foundational work shows that these regimes often emerge from democratic breakdowns or incomplete transitions. They are neither fully authoritarian nor meaningfully democratic, occupying a volatile middle ground where opposition victories sometimes occur but are rarely allowed to translate into governing power. Personalist regimes center on one leader, risking instability from succession crises. Leaders such as Alexander Lukashenko in Belarus or the late Islam Karimov in Uzbekistan built systems so dependent on their individual authority that succession becomes a moment of existential peril. Such regimes often employ elaborate cults of personality and extensive security apparatuses to deter challenges. These models blend coercion, co-optation, and legitimation, adapting to local contexts while prioritizing regime survival. Coercion operates through secret police, paramilitary forces, and judicial repression. Co-optation takes the form of patronage networks, business privileges, and selective elite inclusion. Legitimation ranges from nationalist rhetoric to developmental claims to religious endorsement. No single formula guarantees durability, but successful autocracies typically deploy all three in calibrated combination. Part 4, Federalism and Authoritarianism intertwined. Authoritarian states sometimes adopt federal or quasi-federal structures to manage diversity or co-opt elites. The relationship between federalism and authoritarianism is not purely oppositional. Federal arrangements can serve authoritarian ends under certain conditions. Ethiopia's ethnic federalism post-1991 granted regions autonomy, including secession rights, to accommodate the country's profound ethnic diversity. The Ethiopian People's Revolutionary Democratic Front (EPRDF), a coalition of ethnically based parties, controlled regions via allied parties, resource allocation, and security dominance. This arrangement managed ethnic tensions symbolically while preserving central power until it didn't. Abiy Ahmed's centralizing reforms since 2018 sparked ethnic conflicts and civil war risks, with 2026 tensions e.g. Tigray accusations of federal force buildups, Red Sea port disputes highlighting fragility. Ethiopia's experience shows that federalism in authoritarian contexts can both contain conflict and, when the central bargain unravels, accelerate fragmentation. Pakistan cycles between democratic federalism and military centralization. Coups 1958, 1977, 1999 have repeatedly undermined provincial autonomy, imposing unitary control. Democratic periods restore federal mechanisms, but civilian governments often engage in their own forms of centralization. Federalism accommodates diversity under democracy but enables control under authoritarianism. The case illustrates that federalism is not inherently democratic, its effects depend entirely on the broader political context. Federal structures are double-edged, protective in democratic contexts, tools of domination when subverted. The same institutional features divided authority, multiple veto points, territorial representation that safeguard liberty in democracies can, under authoritarian conditions, be repurposed to extend state reach and fragment opposition. Part V, which promotes development. Authoritarian developmental states e.g. China, Singapore, South Korea under Park Chung-hee achieved rapid growth via insulated decision-making, stability, and reform continuity. Proponents of authoritarian development argue that concentrated power enables long-term planning, suppresses distributional conflicts, and enforces economic discipline. Yet evidence is mixed. China's success involved de facto decentralization resembling federalism, with provinces competing for investment and experimenting with policy. Singapore's growth occurred under exceptional conditions: city-state size, strategic location, and Cold War positioning that are not replaceable. South Korea's authoritarian period laid industrial foundations, but democratic transition 1987 coincided with sustained growth and deepened institutional quality. Democratic federations like India post-1991 reforms, Brazil, and South Africa delivered strong growth phases. India's states compete for investment, Brazil's municipalities pioneered conditional cash transfers, South Africa's provinces manage service delivery. Democratic accountability, while sometimes messy, provides mechanisms for correcting policy failures that autocracies lack. Authoritarian constraints include succession crises and policy reversals that disrupt long-term planning. No error correction mechanisms beyond elite infighting. Cronyism diverting resources from productive investment to politically connected firms. Corruption unchecked by independent institutions, often reaching levels that impede development. Federal democracies offer advantages, positive redundancy, regional experimentation, e.g. India's state-level economic reforms preceding national adoption, Brazil's Bolsa Familia evolving from municipal pilots generates policy innovations that can scale upward. Managing inequalities via fiscal transfers and regional autonomy reduces center-periphery tensions. Resilience against economic and political shocks through dispersed decision-making. Authoritarianism may spur short-term gains but risks long-term stagnation. Federal democracy supports sustainable progress by balancing stability with adaptability, and efficiency with accountability. Part 6, Resilience and Prospects. Autocracies, single-point failures, leader health, coups, succession crises create vulnerability. When power is concentrated in one individual or a narrow elite, the regime's survival hinges on that actor's continued competence, health, and loyalty from security forces. Federal democracies disperse risk. Subnational governments continue functioning if national institutions falter. Multiple veto points prevent any single actor from commandeering the system. This resilience aids economic confidence, rule of law, property rights, and political stability. Investors favor predictable constraints over unchecked executive discretion, because constraints imply continuity across leadership transitions. Federal democracies also recover more quickly from shocks. Subnational units can serve as staging grounds for rebuilding democratic institutions if national-level backsliding occurs. Conclusion. Democratic federalism disperses power, protects rights, accommodates diversity, and builds resilience, offering superior long-term prospects over autocracies' efficiency without accountability model. Autocracies adapt, subverting federal forms, Russia, Ethiopia, or deploying them selectively for control. Success depends not on design alone but on independent institutions, civil society, and norms that give federal arrangements democratic substance. Developing nations face a choice: harness federalism's democratic promise or risk its authoritarian perversion. Evidence favors the former for liberty, welfare, and endurance. Federalism is no panacea. It requires supporting conditions to function democratically, but where those conditions exist, it offers durable advantages that concentrated power cannot match. Main references: Bednar, J. 2021. Federalism as a Safeguard of Democracy. American Political Science Review, 115 3, 817-833. Geddes, B. Wright, J. and Franz, E. 2018. How Dictatorships Work. Cambridge University Press. Guess, G.M. 2018. Building Democracy and International Governance. Taylor and Francis. Kincaid, J. 2010. Federalism and Democracy, Comparative Empirical and Theoretical Perspectives. In Federalism and Democracy. Taylor and Francis. Levitsky, S. and Way, L.A. 2010. Competitive Authoritarianism, Hybrid Regimes After the Cold War. Cambridge University Press. Obidenkova, A. and Swendon, W. 2013. Autocracy sustaining versus democratic federalism, explaining the divergent trajectories of territorial politics in Russia and Western Europe. Territory, Politics, Governance, 1 86-112. Rodden, J. 2004. Comparative Federalism and Decentralization, on Meaning and Measurement. Comparative Politics, 36 481-500. Schettler, A. 2006. Electoral Authoritarianism, The Dynamics of Unfree Competition. Lynn-Renner Publishers. Smith, B. 2005. Life of the Party, The Origins of Regime Breakdown and Persistence Under Single-Party Rule. World Politics, 57 421-451. Stepan, A. 1999. Federalism and Democracy, Beyond the U.S. Model. Journal of Democracy, 10 19-34. VDem Institute. 2023. Democracy Report 2023, Defiance in the Face of Autocratization. University of Gothenburg. Appendix, Democratic Backsliding in Federal Systems. Democratic backsliding erodes institutions incrementally. Federal systems face unique risks and resources. Mechanisms, fiscal centralization creates dependence, rendering subnational units unable to resist national encroachment. Elite co-optation via patronage draws regional leaders into national coalitions, neutralizing potential resistance. Judicial capture eliminates constitutional checks on central overreach. Uneven electoral manipulation targets opposition strongholds while leaving pro-government regions undisturbed. Vulnerabilities, multiple capture points. Regional governments can be co-opted individually. Legalistic centralization. Central governments exploit vague constitutional provisions. Opposition coordination challenges geographically dispersed opposition struggles to unify. Resilience, subnational redoubts, e.g. U.S. states during McCarthyism, Polish regions resisting judicial reforms under PiS provide havens for opposition organizing. Veto points. Bicameralism, supermajority requirements can block centralizing legislation. Multiple mobilization arenas allow civil society to contest authoritarian measures across different levels. Cases: Russia, overwhelmed by sustained assault under Putin, federalism now a hollow shell. India, strained under BJP but resilient via opposition state governments that maintain institutional autonomy and challenge central policies. Brazil, governors countered Bolsonaro's COVID denialism and authoritarian threats, preserving federalism as a check on executive overreach. Federalism's promise is contingent on autonomy, federated parties organized across levels with genuine subnational power, civil society, courts, and norms. Absent these, it becomes a hollow shell or worse, a vehicle for authoritarian consolidation. Appendix, Global Autocratization Trends in 2026, Insights from Freedom House and VDem Reports. This appendix draws on the two most recent major democracy indices, both released in mid-March 2026, to contextualize the essay's arguments within current global realities. The findings from Freedom House's Freedom in the World 2026, The Growing Shadow of Autocracy, and the VDem Institute's Democracy Report 2026, Unraveling the Democratic Era provide powerful empirical backing for the essay's core themes: the concentration versus dispersion of power, the resilience potential of federal structures, and the accelerating vulnerability of democratic institutions worldwide. 1 Overview of 2026 findings. Global democracy and freedom are in steep, accelerating decline. Both reports document a deterioration that is no longer confined to developing nations or post-communist states but has reached core Western democracies, including established federations. Freedom House. Freedom in the World 2026, global freedom declined for the 20th consecutive year in 2025. 54 countries experienced deterioration in political rights or civil liberties, compared with only 35 that registered improvements. Only 21% of the world's population now lives in countries classified as free, a sharp drop from previous decades. Key pressures identified include attacks on media freedom, restrictions on personal expression, and the erosion of due process protections. These trends affect both autocracies and democracies. Notably, autocracies are no longer merely repressive within their borders, they increasingly collaborate systematically to undermine democratic governance globally. Regional snapshots reveal varied but concerning patterns across the world's federations, Americas. While approximately 66% of countries in the region are rated free, population-weighted figures are lower due to the size of partly free and not free nations. The United States, though retaining its free status, experienced one of the largest score drops among free countries, falling to 81 out of 100, driven by executive overreach, mounting pressures on media independence, and the erosion of institutional checks and balances. Asia-Pacific, roughly 49% of countries are free, but 40% of the region's population lives under not free conditions, reflecting the weight of authoritarian powers. Eurasia, the region remains overwhelmingly not free, with approximately 84% of its population living under authoritarian rule. Europe, mostly free overall, 81 to 83% of countries, but with emerging cracks in democratic quality, particularly in newer member states and regions experiencing competitive authoritarian dynamics. VDEM Democracy Report 2026, Unraveling the Democratic Era. The VDEM Institute's findings are even more stark. Global democracy has regressed to levels last seen in 1978 for the average person. Autocracies now outnumber democracies 92 versus 87, with 74% of the world's population living under authoritarian rule, including 28% in closed autocracies where no meaningful political competition exists. A record 44 countries are currently autocratizing, a sharp increase from previous years, while only 12 are democratizing. Critically, 6 of the 10 newest autocratizing cases are located in Europe or North America, including major democratic powers such as the United States, the United Kingdom, Italy, Slovakia, and Slovenia. The United States features prominently in VDEM's analysis. The country experienced an unprecedented speed and scale of democratic erosion. Its liberal democracy index dropped 24% in a single year, causing its global ranking to fall from 20th to 51st out of 179 countries. For the first time in over 50 years, the United States lost its status as a liberal democracy, now classified instead as an electoral democracy. This downgrade reflects rapid concentration of power in the presidency, systematic pressure on media freedom, and legislative constraints on governance that are at their lowest point in over a century. 2. Relevance to federalism and autocracy. The convergence of these two major reports offers 3 critical insights for the essay's comparative analysis of federation and Third World autocracy. Acceleration of backsliding validates resilience arguments. The main essay emphasizes federalism's positive redundancy, the existence of multiple centers of power, policy innovation, and governance capacity as a buffer against authoritarian consolidation. The 2026 data demonstrates why this matters more than ever. Even stable, established federations face acute risks when national executives concentrate power. The United States case, with its strong subnational autonomy and constitutionally protected state governments, illustrates the partial resilience of federal structures. State-level resistance to federal overreach in areas such as civil liberties enforcement, media protection, and judicial independence has slowed some aspects of democratic decline. However, national-level erosion continues to dominate, echoing the patterns observed in Russia, India, and Brazil. Federal structures buy time and create space for resistance, but they cannot prevent democratic hollowing without the active defense of independent institutions, civil society, and federated political parties. Federalism as potential safeguard in autocratizing contexts. VDEM's identification of rapid concentration of powers in the presidency as a key driver of democratic erosion in the United States directly mirrors the essay's analysis of autocracy sustaining federalism in Russia. In both cases, executives have sought to centralize authority while maintaining the formal architecture of federal governance. Yet the divergent outcomes, Russia's complete subversion of federalism versus America's ongoing, if strained, federal resistance, suggest that institutional design alone is insufficient. The report's emphasis on declining media freedom, judicial capture, and the co-optation of regional elites aligns with the mechanisms of backsliding detailed in Appendix I. Federations with robust vertical checks, including strong state judiciaries, genuine fiscal autonomy, and independent subnational media, appear to fare better against what Freedom House terms the growing shadow of autocracy. Developing world parallels and federal vulnerabilities. Many of the autocratizing cases identified in the 2026 reports, including India, Indonesia, and Pakistan, are federal or quasi-federal systems. These cases demonstrate how ethnic and regional divisions can be exploited to facilitate centralization, reinforcing the essay's analysis of Ethiopia and Pakistan. When federal structures are designed primarily to manage ethnic diversity rather than to genuinely disperse power, they become vulnerable to authoritarian capture. The report's documentation of rising restrictions on civil society and media in these countries underscores the mechanisms by which central governments gradually hollow out subnational autonomy without formally abolishing federal institutions. 3 implications for the essay's conclusion. The 2026 reports underscore the urgency of the essay's central argument. Federal democracy's advantages: dispersed power, multiple veto points, policy experimentation, and subnational redoubts are not automatic. They must be actively defended amid global trends toward concentration of power and systematic repression. Without vigilant civil society, independent judiciaries, and federated party systems capable of operating across levels of government, even established federations risk the hollowing out observed in Russia or the ethnic federal failures documented in Ethiopia. The data also counters the short-term authoritarian efficiency claims noted in Part V of the essay. As autocratization spreads globally, the long-term developmental and resilience costs become increasingly apparent. Policy errors accumulate without correction, investor confidence erodes as predictability declines. International isolation intensifies as autocracies face coordinated democratic backlash. The 2026 report suggests that the developmental dividends of authoritarianism, never as robust as claimed, are shrinking further as global norms shift and democratic coordination against authoritarian powers strengthens. Finally, the reports offer a sobering reminder that the contest between federation and autocracy is not static. The growing shadow documented by Freedom House and the unraveling identified by VDEM represent accelerating trends that demand urgent attention. For scholars, policymakers, and citizens concerned with democratic resilience, the task is no longer merely to design federal institutions but to defend them against sustained, sophisticated efforts at subversion, efforts that now target established democracies alongside developing nations. Appendix references. Arato, A. 2021. Populism, Constitutionalism, and the Role of Courts. Philosophy and Social Criticism, 47 321-331. Bermeo, N. 2016. On Democratic Backsliding. Journal of Democracy, 27 1, 5-19. Chaudhry, S. and Hume, M. 2022. Federalism, Democracy, and Democratic Backsliding. International Journal of Constitutional Law, 21, 1-28. Grzimalabusi, A. 2019. How Populists Rule, The Consequences for Democratic Governance. Polity, 51 4, 707-717. Levitsky, S. and Zablat, D. 2018. How Democracies Die. Crown Publishing. Obidenkova, A. and Swendon, W. 2013. Autocracy Sustaining versus Democratic Federalism. Territory, Politics, Governance, 1 86-112. Skopil, K.L. 2018. Autocratic Legalism. University of Chicago Law Review, 85 545-584. Taro, S. 2021. The Dualities of Federalism, Autonomy, Coordination, and Resistance. Publius, The Journal of Federalism, 51 4, 545-566. Freedom House. 2026. Freedom in the World 2026, The Growing Shadow of Autocracy. Freedom House. https, freedomhouse.org. Report Freedom World 2026 Growing Shadow Autocracy. VDem Institute. 2026. Democracy Report 2026, Unraveling the Democratic Era. University of Gothenburg. https, www.v-dem.net. Documents 75 vdem_institute_democracy_report_2026_lowers.pdf